Hello and welcome to Ignore All Previous Instructions, a podcast about programming and culture and society and what does it all mean? Were computers a mistake? Let's find out. Today I'm on with Jasmine Greenaway. Did I say your last name correctly?
Yes.
Fantastic. I meant to ask that beforehand. But here we are. So, Jasmine, I'd love to ask you to introduce yourself, give us a little context about what you're into, what you're working on lately.
Hi. Well, I'm Jasmine Greenaway. I work in developer relations and I like to call myself a technologist. I love to tinker and work with all types of things. Right now, my focus is in data, specifically databases under Microsoft. And I also teach part time as a computer science instructor. It gives me a lot of joy. It's what I really love to do. But I'm always in something tech related or tech adjacent. So having fun out here.
Um, when you teach computer science, what audience do you like to teach? Are you teaching adults or kids, teenagers?
I have taught mostly adults. So I started teaching at a community college, and that's normally adults who usually have, a set of responsibilities outside of your folks who are in the younger adult range. And now I teach a lot of students who are kind of transitioning out of high school into college, so this is normally their first semester. And yeah, for me, I enjoy teaching, working with adults, mainly because I feel like it's easier for me to relate. That doesn't mean that I don't mind working with kids and showing them how to code. I just, for me, I like teaching with the tools that I already know and use. And so tools like Scratch or Make Code, those are fun, but not tools that I use every day.
So are you teaching them using like your day-to-day tools now?
Yeah, yeah. By the end of my course, at least the Computer Science 101 course, we students learn GitHub. They learn how to use code spaces, and they're familiar with the Python interpreter and notebooks and things like that. So I feel like coming to my class, they have a kind of a good foundation of what they'll need to be successful in their career and in throughout their academic career.
That's I feel like Git is one of the most important software things that's not software
Mm-hmm.
that people have to know in this industry. I just watched a pretty fun video about Git worktree, which I hadn't used before.
Mm.
Um, uh, and so I'm excited to try that out. The things were like this is clear. Git worktree has been around since I think 2015. I think was when it came out. So basically 10 years. So we all get there eventually. Are there any Git? Do you have a favorite Git trick?
So to talk a little bit about what students learn in terms of Git for my course, we use 100% UI. So they don't
Mm.
use the command line. We use integrated Git tools in VS Code.
Oh,
Um,
so is it visual?
yes. So
Oh, okay.
essentially, when you are in VS Code, you make a change to your code base. You see the little numbers pop up, and you know that something has changed in some files. You write your little commit message in the UI. You press commit, and press sync, and our AKA get push pull. Um, and I think this is an approach that works a lot, at least for me. So my background as a .NET dev was using Visual Studio. Git is not the first source control language that I used. I used
Right.
Subversion,
Subversion.
then
Mm-hmm.
Visual Source Safe,
Oh,
and
I didn't even know that.
yeah, so very very niche Microsoft Deep Cut development tool, and so in Visual Studio we didn't really need the terminal. Like our IDE had essentially everything we needed, and so funny enough, I didn't really level up my Git skills until I got to GitHub. I remember saying in my interview,
Mm.
I don't know Git very well. Is that okay? And they're like, no, it's fine. And so, that's kind of where one approach that I used was to use GitHub Desktop. I used GitHub Desktop, and the nice thing about that is you can kind of map the things you're doing in the UI as someone who's coming from a very visual developer tool set, to map that to the terminal. I will say the terminal is much faster, but GitHub Desktop definitely helped me on ramp and get into terminal. And so if I were to teach a class on that, if I were to teach a class on Git, how to use Git, I would start with GitHub Desktop on
That's
it.
an interesting point because I think that I'm thinking about things I probably take for granted now, that the understanding Git and understanding the mental model of what branching is and like how branches relate to each other and how things, branch off. It's like the problem of you aren't doing a definition if you use the word in the definition. That problem is happening to me right now. But when you detour from the path and then you call that something, that using a visual tool might make that more clear. Whereas, a series of keywords don't necessarily, even though they are the words, but it's people get like getting the mental model of the system. I'm thinking about that's also how I took a Vim workshop years ago, and after taking the workshop, it went from what is this weird thing where I can never escape this editor to understanding like how to navigate around, because all those letters to navigate around stand for keywords, and so understanding it really really helped the situation. So
Yeah.
that's interesting stuff.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of this new generation, at least new generation of technologists that are coming in, a lot of them are, from, I guess we could say, the iPad generation. So, they're all on touch screens. And so normally, or in a lot of cases, a lot of them don't have a lot of keyboard time. So, kind of getting them familiar with their operating system, getting familiar with the developer tools. And one thing I've had to be mindful is like, things that we as developers take for granted. Control, like copy and paste, Control C, Command
The escape
C.
key.
Yeah, exactly. These like things like that, seem like second nature to us students, people who are learning how to be productive engineers, productive developers, are not quite familiar with. And so sometimes I have to slow down. Sometimes I have to, just point out, like, how do you write a forward slash or backward slash? Where is the pipe operator? Where is the pipe? Where can you find that on the keyboard?
So that makes me want to ask you, what are some things that you've learned from your students?
I think, I think the biggest lessons I've learned since I started teaching about 7 years ago now. Wow. Is
Congrats.
Is
like,
to,
oh wow, it snuck up on you.
Right? Exactly. And I think the biggest thing was not to assume that students have like a predefined set of or a set of knowledge. So things like jargon. I try to dismantle that and try not to use acronyms, little things like that, and just assume that there's going to be a wide range of students who might know what I'm talking about and know what I'm not. And so I try to always make my language approachable and inviting in a way for someone to be curious, so that students don't feel they're behind. I think honestly, it's sometimes I feel like it's a big I guess, for lack of a better term, failure on my point, if a student comes to me and is like, I'm totally lost. And I think
Right.
the first thing that I do is like, what could I have done differently in this particular line of coursework, or whatever this unit might be, to help them, make them feel like they could have really grasped what we're learning. And then I look at their homework assignments and see how much
How much they've actually shown that they're trying to do work.
Exactly. because like I think one thing that I say in the beginning of my course is like, practice makes perfect, and so we spend a lot of time in our class coding. Like I don't spend a lot of time like flipping through slides. I just, knowing my experience as a student, I wasn't the best student. Knowing that, taking that experience, I try to make our classes interactive and as fruitful as possible in terms of adding an interactive experience where students feel like they're going to be doing the things that they're going to be doing in their homework. Um, so, um, so yeah, I just think that I think I feel like for me as an instructor, I'm still trying to find that sweet balance of kind of saying, okay, this is something where I can improve versus maybe let's talk with the student about, their progress and see what we can do to get them where they need to be, or kind of being at a point where realizing, okay, the student is not being very proactive, they're not being very engaged with the coursework. Maybe this isn't a semester for them. Maybe they need to withdraw. I've started to do that a lot more, saying like, listen, you haven't been at like, half of these classes, you missed like 3 consecutive classes. Maybe it's time that you consider withdrawing. Versus me coming to my office hours and feeling like, I'm reteaching or teaching the coursework that I've taught like over the past 3 weeks.
So do you think that do you think that that's more of a change in your approach, or do you think that that's a change that's been happening since from your year 1 to year 7 of teaching?
That's a change that's been happening from year 1 to year 7. I feel like, in the beginning, I was like, oh, students aren't understanding, the content, or they're lost. It must be all me. But now it's kind of been like more of a middle ground. Like,
you have more data.
Yeah, exactly. More data. I can't stretch myself thin. And I also understand that, for a lot of students, this is their first year. And so knowing what I know about high school, there's a lot more hand holding, right? There's a lot more,
Depends.
Yeah, exactly. Depends on what school you're coming from, but sometimes, it can seem a little bit more of a hands off experience versus,
Right.
college.
There's an assumption of independence.
Exactly.
That's part of what it's training you to do. Yes.
Exactly. And now, I think students kind of come in feeling a little bit like, oh, you want me to, kind of have a little bit more control over my academic future, which is also kind of, a little nerve wracking, right? Like, being a young adult, coming, especially if you just come right out of high school, right into college, and, you're meeting all these new people, you're having all these new experiences. Oh yeah, and there's school. Like, so it can be a lot. And so I try to be a lot empathetic. And I think that there's nothing wrong with a second start. I mean, I took physics 3 times. I'm horrible at physics. Mm-hmm. And, I think there's just no shame in starting over. It doesn't mean, I try to encourage students to make sure when I suggest withdrawing that I tell them my story, that like, I was not great at physics, and it's okay.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah,
I was just thinking that it's such a. I was a very good student, and so that can be sometimes a detriment. I think, and I would see it in some teachers that people become teachers because they were really good at it constantly and not because they struggled with it. And I think that the people who can admit and have some experience as a struggle can end up being much better teachers because they can relate to the failure modes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how I feel. That's exactly how I feel. And so, one of the first things I ask when I'm having a conversation with a student is like, this is your first year. How was it for you? And try to just make them realize like there's no shame in learning how to, transition into this different way of being. We all kind of absorb things differently, and we all come from different life experience. And so I always try and come in with that knowledge.
So cool. Well, may I switch gears I have an idea about something to ask you about, and then you can say, I don't want to talk about that. Let's talk about something else. But you said you were working with databases more. And I know that just in my perception of the industry and like business and economy at large, data is the thing. Data is AI as well, but even then, I would say that, data, how we store it, how we access it, how we secure it is a very much a situation. And so I wondered what's interesting you in data and databases these days.
Yeah, I can also preface that with saying that my when I got into developer relations, I was focused specifically on .NET and C Sharp, and one of
Right.
the things I really love about developer relations is this ability to kind of redefine myself, and so you know, any large company, you're going to have a lot of moving around, and I ended up landing my feet in data space, and I think at that point everyone was talking about data science, and
Mm-hmm.
of course AI and how
Big data.
and big data and things like that. And I was like, what about databases? My background as a developer, a lot was back end, and I always found
Mm-hmm.
databases fascinating, and there's so much to talk about. And I think with the dawn of, well, not even with the dawn of AI, AI's been around for many, many years. Um,
Exactly. But the contemporary fascination therein with large
exactly,
language models. Yeah.
exactly. It's still like an important topic. It's never going to go away. Data is always going to be important, especially now where we're finding that by next year we're going to have over, I think it's 14 zettabytes of data like in the world.
I don't even know how many zeros that is.
Yeah, me neither.
Zeta bytes?
And
Isn't zeta the last letter? Are we out of letters?
I don't
What are
even
they
know.
gonna do?
I don't even know.
Isn't it? I know my Greek letters from sororities and fraternities, so that's my experience. Is that zeta is last, but
Yeah,
what are they gonna do?
I don't know, but I guess I'm probably going to figure out how long it'll take to download all of that, because apparently right now they're tracking that it'd be over 1 billion years to download all the data in the world.
Huh. That we know about and or estimate.
Yeah, right.
So, and computable data
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, data represented in formats that computers understand.
Mm-hmm.
So, even then, there's just so much.
So much. So much.
So,
And so for me, I think, you know, we're seeing a lot of just discussions around, data lakes and,
what's a data lake?
so a data lake essentially is a way to essentially format bring in your not only your tabular data but also any unstructured data, like essentially have a place to store all your files or maybe like documents like you would in like a NoSQL kind of setup.
So,
And
your data lake can store it can be your CSVs, but also the stuff you would put in S3.
yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So with that, we're seeing a lot of, data comes in all shapes, forms, formats, velocities, and there's a lot of discussion about like how do you store all that in one place, and also make it so that engineers can do what they need to do, and analysts can do what they need to do, and everybody can do what they need to do with this particular data, but also be wary of security and governance and all these other things. And so I think it's a really interesting problem, something that I have not even scratched the surface of. And
So this is newer that you're digging into this.
yeah, yeah. So
That's cool.
yeah, it is cool, and I think that but databases stand the test of time. I don't see those going anywhere anytime soon. Like a database
No.
can be part of a data lake. So and there's a lot of systems out there that kind of use that to your typical SQL language to query things that are in a data lake. So yeah, so that, and of course with AI, of course everyone's talking about vector databases.
What's an example of a vector database?
So one popular example that really had a really big rise was, oh my goodness, the name is escaping me. I could search it, but oh my god, Pinecone.
Never heard of it. That's the thing is like you could just make there you go. You could have made up a noun and I'd be like, yeah, sure. Like, I don't know. So okay, never heard of it. What's its deal?
So Pinecone is just was one of like a really just a very popular database that's used right now. And the idea is that versus doing instead of like doing your general keyword search or even like a semantic search, you're kind of searching with context. So essentially, I could like search for, so for example, think about like your typical conference, right? You search for maybe some like tech topics. So like maybe I'm interested in C Sharp, maybe I'm interested in databases. But what if
Sure. Right. What track do I want to, what room, what among the options, what room do I want to go to?
Yes, and sometimes
Sure.
the title and the abstract don't have all the information. Like there might be a session on, I don't know, WebAssembly, right? That has some aspects of data and databases, maybe C Sharp that might be interesting. And so maybe the title, maybe the abstract says something like .NET. So if as in a typical keyword search, that's not going to show up in my list. But in your vector search, then that would show up essentially. It's because .NET and C Sharp are so closely related.
Oh, so vector, so then it's measuring the distance from a topic to another topic.
Yes.
And so then that's creating a mathematical relationship so that when you're querying, you can also have the neighbors or like yeah, that's starting to make sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's literally it. It's literally like taking like words and turning them into numbers and then like measuring their distance from each other.
Mm-hmm. And then we have math.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out, and then you can put some math on it, just a sprinkle of math, and see what happens. That's like, did you see there's this thing going around that AI or the LLM engines can't spell raspberry?
No.
That's it's kind of fun. It's an example of, so I only learned about it by virtue of someone sharing a video where someone explains why, and that you say like, hey, can you spell raspberry? And then it does something stupid. And you're like, I literally handed you the word. How could you not do it? But because it has something to do with that, the way it works being the next distance of the prediction of what would come next. And that if you say spell raspberry and it's all connected, like it's not tokenized into separate bits. Whereas if you were like, hey, spell raspberry, it's R space A space, S. I'm not going to try and spell raspberry off the top of my head. But it had to do with I think tokenization could be the wrong word, but it had to do with how it breaks down the query. And then because it breaks down the query in such a way, and then its answers based on the relationship of the closest next nearest things coming next to that query, then that's why I can't spell raspberry.
That's so interesting.
So the reason that it can't do things is math. The reason it can do things is also math.
Wow, that's so interesting. Now I want to try it. Now I'm curious. And it's so
yeah,
funny.
it's like see if it's changed or fixed.
Right, and LLM getting tongue tied. That's kind of funny.
Yeah, or I'm fond of the term hallucination. That's the AI term for when they just go off the rails.
Yeah,
and they're just I said there's one with pizza that was very funny. That was like, oh, what you like, where like it takes a hallucination and determines that that's now the answer to this fact of knowledge.
Oh God.
So
yeah, fun
stuff. But and so, what else has been interesting to you lately?
Oh wow. So honestly, rest has been interesting to me.
Classic rest.
Yeah, classic rest. Like,
I've had to look up what it stands for in the past, and I can't do it right now off the top of my head.
Rest. I mean, like, are we thinking like API rest, or are we thinking? I'm thinking like little rest.
Oh, you're thinking nap ministry rest.
Yes.
Oh, I was like, I guess we can talk about rest if that's what you want to talk about. Like,
Honestly,
okay, sure.
honestly,
No, that's
I said this summer that I was gonna like build like you know apps and I was gonna like do my own
you.
thing
I think
and
weren't you were gonna. I thought you were gonna work on a book.
so I finished a book and I did
Yeah.
publish that and I am kind of in the
Okay.
process of kind of working on something else. But also
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that I'm really trying to get back to is the joy that I get from just building things for myself. And so I have a
Mm.
couple projects
Mm-hmm.
going, but also, and I find that to be a form of rest of like, not having a particular work deadline, not having a particular kind of
Mm-hmm.
end goal, but just like kind of building and kind of, having fun with what I'm doing. And I think I'm trying to get that, just trying to get back to that point where, it's where I'm adding more enjoyment
Mm.
into this profession that I built for myself because there is a piece of it that like brought me to it because I had this
Right.
particular enjoyment of it, and so I find that to be rest, to be able to like code for fun.
Yeah. I think a dear friend of mine said something really really clever. I'll have to send it to you after the show. But the gist of it was along the lines that rest looks different for different people at different times,
Yeah.
and that because I think when we think of collectively when we think of rest, we can often think of taking a nap and laying down, and that's the way rest looks. But rest can also look like dumping out your whole bucket of Legos and just letting yourself go at it for a few hours. That can be rest. The rest can be, I really would like to lay in a hammock in a field of flowers, but I could also, go bird watching because, yes, after a certain age, we all suddenly become interested in birds. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's that. And so, oh, that's interesting. I also want to ask you about something you said that I'd like to dig into a little bit. Is you said you, I felt like I heard you imply that there was a getting back to somewhere in
Mm-hmm.
terms of the joy you get from building things. And I want to ask about that place that you're trying to get back to, or if you've thought about that maybe you can't go there anymore and maybe it's going to be a new place. Have you thought about this?
I never thought about if it would be a new place. I think that what I'm trying to get back to is just like the source of my passion. I feel like it's always been there.
Mm.
But I
Mm-hmm.
feel like when it's tied to, a paycheck or even a deadline, it doesn't
Yes.
seem,
Anything becomes a job and
yeah,
deadlines too.
yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't become, as fun anymore. And I feel like, it's easy to forget about that passion. And so um, I think that, when I started coding when I was a kid, I was building for myself and it was
Right.
fun. And it's not, and not to say it's not fun now, for like what I do.
Sure, but maybe the pie chart is jilted a little bit more in the direction of I like that my check's clear.
Yes,
You know,
yes,
I don't think
100%.
there's anything wrong with that. I
Right,
like my checks clearing,
right.
and but that uh, we do spend more time at work than we do pretty much anything else other than sleeping,
Yeah.
and so I've long thought that wanting to spend that time in a way that we enjoy is not a ridiculous thing to want.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I'm also hearing like the idea of play.
Mhm.
Like
Yes.
that's a classic recovery and, like ways to recover from burnout things is embracing play. And so I'm hearing some play in what you're describing too.
Yeah. Yeah. As someone who is still like kind of recovering from burnout from like, many years, I think
Yep.
that, it's been kind of an evolution of like trying to, this word balance. It comes across anytime you want to talk about burnout in any capacity. But I mean, to be honest, like for me, balance is important. I want to be able to, of course, push myself, but not overdo it, and like and learn more, and level up and things like that in my profession. But I
Mm-hmm.
also want to do that, at my own pace outside of what I do, out of what I do every day as as my profession. So, and I think the other thing that I'm also realizing is that I'm also putting this a little bit of pressure on myself to stick with
A
one
little.
a little. Yeah, right.
That's weird. Yeah, it's not a little.
Yeah, it's not a little. To feel
Yeah,
like I have
yeah.
to stick with one technology, one thing. I
Mm,
I think I mentioned before in my intro I like to dabble, and I think that
yeah.
gives me a lot of joy. And I think that I want to let go of this idea that it has to go somewhere and it has to be this one particular thing. It has to be this one particular solution, and it has to be this particular way to be done. And I think that I think one thing that I've learned is like collaborating out in the open, building in the open can sometimes be really beneficial and can, honestly be really impactful. And kind of
Mm-hmm.
that's where I'm at right now. Just trying to just do more for myself in that capacity.
And refill your own cup.
Yes.
What kind of things are you working on? Are you not ready to talk about it yet? And that's okay. We can protect baby projects.
It's okay. No, I think the one thing that I'm working on, and the word of or the phrase like "don't roll your own crypto" keeps on uh uh keeps
You
on
can do things for
repeating.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you
So
rolling your own crypto?
yeah. So essentially, I'm trying to
Yeah.
build this little password manager because
Okay.
this password manager that I purchased, I bought a license in Windows and Mac. Went to a
Hmm.
subscription model and is forcing me to pay.
When you bought it and you're like, but I already bought it,
Yeah,
and now you're saying now keep paying it, which is their right because to maintain software.
yeah,
So,
I get that. I
but you can also choose
I get
to
that.
do
Yeah,
something
I
else.
I totally understand, and like I'm like happy. Like if they had offered a like pay this X amount of money and you never have to
And we'll
pay.
never talk to you again.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
like and that's what I thought the agreement initially was. And
Hmm. Hmm.
I think another thing for me is that yeah, I want a little bit more control over kind of my passwords and like how I can manage them myself. And so I'm
Hmm.
just like out of curiosity, like what would it be like to build your own like password manager? And granted, I am using other like a different service, but like I'm just trying
Sure,
to
and you're
explore.
probably not designing your own encryption algorithm.
No,
Um, you know,
yeah,
I think it's also important in projects to identify the part you think is interesting.
mm-hmm.
And it sounds like for this, what I'm hearing, the thing you think is interesting is building a tool that is used.
Yeah,
And so then that can be a very motivating thing. And then it also helps you ignore a bunch of other stuff that is not the purpose of the project,
yeah, yeah.
you
I
know.
mean, and like I this is my first foray into any kind of like tool like this, or like even like really like
Hmm.
password management in this capacity. And I
Hmm.
think one thing that kind of I've thought about is like, what if we all kind of just managed our own passwords in our own way? Like, what if we just like, would it be easier for somebody to, and I don't know the answer to this, and I haven't really really given this really deep thought. Would it be easier or would it be harder for somebody like an attacker or somebody doing something malicious trying to um get into like a
Well,
password manager in the
yeah.
cloud versus trying to go over my me and my I don't know my friend's CSV files that might be attached to a password manager that we use that maybe has like password protected. I don't know.
Sure, and it depends on how you do it, and also so something in a previous episode of this podcast, we were talking about WordPress and the like the way so like word there's been so many just worldwide there's so many attacks
Yeah.
on the web now. It drastically increased, especially in 2024, and that WordPress is a target of attack. Windows is a target of attack because they're ubiquitous. So, a word that just came to mind is biodiversity.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like the perhaps, and this is, just we're just posing fun theories, is that perhaps that it, if there's more, if our attackers are like the parasites trying to destroy all the bananas, but then there's different species of bananas, like you have your password manager, and then there's not just three major password managers or one major password manager. There's, also a diversity of them that makes the system more resilient.
Yes.
In theory, if you if we take like permacultural inspiration.
Right.
So I think that's an interesting idea. I wanted to make sure to give you props because remember that the majority of people, A, don't use a password manager, or B, do it really, really badly. And I have been volunteering with, a nonprofit organization where they say, and here's our Google Doc of the passwords that has, blink at that. And so the Google Doc of the passwords that people who haven't been involved in the organization for 8-10 years have access to. Mm-hmm. That's like, and they haven't changed since then. Mm-hmm. It's like, so if you're thinking, we talk ourselves out of, I do it too. We talk ourselves out of so many more projects than we do. It took me a lot to get to making this podcast. And even then it's still really scary. And, because who am I to do a thing? But people do things all the time, and make your cool little password manager is going to be cool. And also, like, if you get started on and something else gets shiny and strikes your, idea, like, that's also okay.
Yeah.
But
100%. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, it sounds like a fun project. Although I do want to roll back to what we said about, we talked a little smack about deadlines, and I do want to give a little credit to deadlines, because I have had a few instances where, say a friend of mine, they made an album that was, remixes or reimaginings of some of their tracks, and so then I asked, I was like, can you please give me a deadline, because then I will do it. But so sometimes I do find deadlines motivating, but at the same, like, balancing in your head that they're completely made up. Mm-hmm. Like, these are for this context of things. No one is going to have a cardiac event, if a thing doesn't happen. So, but that made up deadlines can sometimes be helpful. Mm-hmm. So
yes,
some appreciation for them.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say that sometimes I often do thrive off urgency. That's just how my brain works. And so a deadline definitely does, put my pedal to the metal to get whatever I need to get done. So to your point, yes.
Yeah, I was recently talking to someone who said that the way their brain works is that there's only 2 times, and those times are now and not now. Mm-hmm. And that there are no other times. The concept of time. Those are the only times that exist. There is now and not now. And so that drive toward urgency, I think, is that it pushes you into now.
Yeah. And
so then it happens because it's now, and not now is shrugs, ?
Right.
And it's difficult. Time is weird, also fake. So someone made up time. They made up time. It didn't exist. Stuff happens when we get older, but what we call time is a concept. So, my other favorite thing someone said about this, the time was made up by big clock to sell more clocks. So it's all just a trap.
It is. But yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day for me, just to your point, like the ability to have the freedom to like pick things up, put things down, come back to them when I feel ready, when I feel comfortable, is something that brings me a lot of joy and peace when it's just for myself. I'm just somebody who likes to get in all types of things. So, I was going to say I have a repository graveyard, but it's not even really a graveyard. It's like just a repository of things that I'm going to come back to.
A repository plateau, like
Plateau. I
or
love that.
field. Uh, that's I think about that too. There's plenty of I have both my ideas notepad of all these things that I write down ideas when I think of, oh, wouldn't it be cool if,
Yeah.
and then I'll write down, what, oh, I could make a short film, I could write a story, I could write a play, I could, organize an event, I could throw a party. So I write all these things down, and then I'll even start on some of them. So there's been a couple where this is the thing I've been accepting about myself, is that I'll kind of poke at them a little bit and, get them moving a little bit. And then I'll just like, it is very vibe centered. It is driven by vibes of deciding to drop or pursue.
Mm-hmm.
That's perhaps, I was looking at the idea of producing an event, and because I like producing events, kind of getting back into it. And so I was poking around at what I might want to produce. I talked to people who would be enthusiastically interested in coming to the event, but it needed participants, and I'm being vague on purpose. But so seeing if I could actually recruit participants in the event versus just people who wanted to watch. And that was where I got a sticking point. And I was like, okay, this isn't the moment for this thing, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
People would love to go to it if it suddenly appeared out of nowhere, but let's just not. It's okay.
Yeah.
Not for now. So it's on the. I don't like, because plateau works, but I mean in the geography sense, not in the like. I think when people when I've heard of plateaus, it's usually some sort of body thing, and it's like, oh, I'm trying to build muscle or lose weight or something, and now I've plateaued, and then it's a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know why is it bad? It doesn't have
Right.
to be bad. It's like you're not losing any progress. Oh my gosh, I went. So last episode, I was telling Dawn that I got an inflatable kayak. So I got this inflatable kayak. That's my rest, is I'm gonna go kayaking. And so, but then I went kayaking in an inlet near the ocean. And I don't know if you've heard of the ocean, but it has tides. And so I got stuck in a kayak treadmill. So I was losing. So this is why I was like, no, a plateau would have been good, because then I could rest.
Mm-hmm.
But I was paddling, and then I would need to take a break. And then in the time that I took a break, I would lose all the progress I had made because
Mm-hmm.
of the tide. And I swear I did this for my smartwatch died. I don't know how long I did this for. So I did it for some period of time. And then eventually, because real winners quit, I gave up and let the tide take me, and I just aimed myself for another shore, and then I walked across a bridge to get my car and just asked a guy to watch my boat, and it was all fine. But I sure would have taken a plateau then.
Mm-hmm.
That's it would have been great to just rest and rest.
Right. Yeah.
Rest and life fest.
Oh my god. Yeah, that's all. That sounds. I mean, for me, as somebody who is like a very weak swimmer, that sounds terrifying. But
Fair.
I to your point, I think like a plateau is like I really haven't really thought of it that way. A plateau, like what is wrong with the plateau? Like it means that you're just at a place where
You're
can,
progressing, and then
yeah,
and it doesn't mean you didn't go down. So if your goal is to go up, like a plateau, like if you're climbing a mountain, you want a plateau so that
yeah,
you don't have to keep climbing the entire time.
exactly.
That sounds like a good thing.
Exactly. And
Hmm.
yeah, I think that, at least for people in, kind of taking it back to this, this process or, my love for like teaching people technology,
Mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm,
think a
mm-hmm,
lot of
mm-hmm.
people don't realize that like, you can treat coding as a skill. It doesn't have to be a professional skill. It can be something that can just be fun to do, and that you don't have to
Mm-hmm.
like turn it into business or a career aspiration. It could just be something where you're like building a little like a website for your community, You could be,
Mm-hmm.
making scripts that make it easy for you to, I don't know, unzip some files that you have. It could be
Right.
just a little app that's just for you. And,
Yeah.
I think that people see that as like, I think one time I started taking piano lessons, and someone asked me like, okay, so like, where
Oh,
are you going
lovely.
with this? I'm like, I'm just having fun.
I'm just taking piano lessons.
Yeah, I'm just
Right.
taking piano lessons. And I feel like
Yeah.
some people don't realize that some people, think that like just accumulating a skill means that you must be, you have to be putting it into good use. But what's a good use? We've seen good and
That's
bad
a great
uses of things,
question.
and like what about an okay use? Like, or not even an okay use? Like, there's no good or bad. There's just uses.
Yeah.
Let me
Can
back
we
up.
just use it? It can
There
be a
is bad
dumb
use.
use.
Yeah,
There are bad uses.
there are
There
bad
are bad
uses.
uses. But yeah, if you throw a hammer at a person, that's a bad use of a hammer.
Yes,
That's
exactly. So, but
that's
to that point, yeah, I think that like sometimes you can just pick something up and it can just be yours. It doesn't have to be for anything else.
that's lovely. Well, that I feel like that's like a really nice cap. So, could I ask you, do you have anything that you're working on that you want to hype? Anything you want to share with the audience? Any where they can follow you, that kind of thing?
Yeah, you can follow me on LinkedIn. I feel like that's where I've been doing a lot of engagement these days. Um,
LinkedIn is somehow the best social network right now.
it is. It is.
How did it happen?
You know,
How? Just
I
everything else just went to trash.
right.
And then what's left is LinkedIn.
Yeah, I
So
know.
crazy.
But like also, I mean,
Yeah.
I always promise myself that I will get like a start engaging more on X. So my hand,
Oh.
I know. I'm saying that's the expression that I gave
Jasmine,
myself
I
internally right there.
don't. Yeah. I just made an account on Nas.
Oh,
That's
what's
like
that?
it's a new it's like there's Blue Sky.
Mm-hmm.
There's so yet another one is at Nos NOS. So NOS.social. I'm on their in their test flight instance. I don't totally understand it yet, but there's like relays and stuff, kind of Mastodon-y, but it's not ActivityPub.
Okay.
So I don't know. But anyway, so you said LinkedIn.
Yeah. So LinkedIn, for now, and I think that's probably where I'm engaging the most. And of course, you can follow me on GitHub and see what I'm building. You can see the repos that I turned public on Paladique, Paladique. Yeah, I think that's pretty much the two places you can find me. Also, I always want to hype up my book, Fundamentals for Self-Taught Programmers. It's if you are just looking to like learn what software engineering is, but like maybe not ready to take the plunge into like opening up your own editor. You want to hear some stories from people who have been there, who got their start. It's a really good book that you can just kind of sit down and read and learn about just the industry versus having to just open up your laptop and start coding. There is parts in there, but you can decide when you want to do that. So yeah, I think it's probably
Very cool. That's awesome. All right, and then I want to start remembering to mention this at the end of the episode is that ignore all previous instructions is on you can follow us on Instagram at techcult.podcast and it's on YouTube at techcultpodcast. And until next time, thank you so much for coming on, Jasmine.
Thank you so much for having me, Pam.